Hi, pretty little lifters. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to be chatting with guest Morgan Hernandez. Morgan is a middle and high school health and PE teacher based out of Oregon. She also creates awesome health resources on Teachers Pay Teachers that I have used in my ninth grade health class and that I'm very grateful for. And she's a content creator, she's a mama, she's a wife, and she also judges local dance competitions. I love when she sneaks in that content. It's kind of fun to see behind the scenes. Morgan and I had only chatted previously in the DMs, and one day we did get to chat on the phone in real life, and we got to talk about teacher things and teacher business things and more. And it was so nice to connect and vent a little bit. Now let's welcome Morgan to the podcast. All right, Morgan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for those of you who are listening to this and not watching this, Morgan has on this epic PE shirt. Can you tell everyone what you are wearing?
So I got this from Amped Up Learning, and it says 5-star review for deodorant, highly recommended by this PE teacher.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's funny because I think I didn't have this issue till I started teaching like 5th grade. Obviously when kids start like going through puberty, and then I got to PE and I was like, oh, like we need deodorant. Like this is a thing.
It is. Yep. I have deodorant sticks on my wish list every year. So
oh my gosh, that's
they're
so
always
smart.
needed.
Yeah, that's so smart. I love that. So can you share with us a little bit about where you're from, how long you've been teaching, and why you decided to get into teaching health and PE?
Yeah, so I'm from Eastern Oregon, which is like a really rural and kind of like desolate place. Most Oregonians live in the valley, which is like Salem, Eugene, and Portland. And I got into teaching kind of like not necessarily by accident. So when I went to college, I wanted to double major in dance and in education because I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And when I went to college, the education program said you cannot double major. And so I said, I'm just going to do things my own way. Thank you very much. And I got a Bachelor of Arts in Dance. And I decided that I really wanted to be a dance professor because I love teaching and I love dance. And I ended up really injured, so I couldn't audition for the Master of Fine Arts program that I wanted to get into. And so I came back to Eastern Oregon. I had no plan. And my mom just said, just get into education. Like, you have your bachelor's degree, try and become a sub, just get a job. So I was a substitute, Title I, a para, just kind of everything. And I thought for a while I really wanted to be a special education teacher. And after realizing how much paperwork they do, I realized that job was not for me. I love them. We need them very dearly, but that was not the job for me. So I decided to get a Master of Arts in Teaching, and I was endorsed in PE Health and Health Science since my minor was in PE and Health when I was getting my bachelor's degree. And I have been in education for 10 years, and for the past 7 years, I have been a PE and health teacher, and I haven't really looked back because I just love it.
Because it's so awesome. I love it.
It's
Wait,
so
awesome. You taught PE and health for 7 years. What about the first 3 years? Were you doing, was that your subbing, or what was that the first 3 years?
So I was in 3 different schools, and I was like a paraeducator, a title teacher, and then I was like part-time sub and then part-time paraeducator also. And that was all for elementary schools.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. And I mean, that is kind of a big switch from like being in those roles to like full on, I'm teaching PE and health.
Yes. Yeah. And it was really good though, because you get to be in the classroom and working with kids and kind of just see how their minds work and like what teaching strategies work and don't. And so I learned a lot just from that, even though the structure is a lot different.
Yeah. And what made you interested? Like, was health, was that something you were always interested in? Like, what made you get that minor? Because I know you were saying like dance. So I see the connection to like PE, but where did like the passion for health come from?
So when I was like right after I was born, my sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I grew up just kind of like in and out of hospitals, and just like along the side of my sister's like health journey, and just realizing like the importance of like the every choice that we make has like a really big impact. And my mom is a dance teacher and a fitness instructor. And just like she was such a positive role model in that regard that like we grew up just like always just like taking our health, I think maybe a little bit more seriously than other people. And it just kind of became
Yeah.
a passion of mine to educate others as well.
I love that it kind of ran in the family with dance and movement and health. I think that's really cool. All right. So you were mentioning, and it's funny because I've never been to Oregon. It is on my list of states that I want to visit. But you were mentioning there's like the part that we all know when I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of those places that you mentioned, like Salem,
Mhm.
Eugene, like, but you were saying you work in a rural school district.
Yes.
What has that been like, and how much of a priority are health and physical education to like the students, the parents, the districts? Because I've definitely worked in like different parts of the city and different areas. And you do see, depending on where schools are, like you do see an increase in health and movement, and sometimes it's not a priority. So what has it been like being in a more rural area?
So I've always lived in a rural area, so I haven't like experienced things that are like from like big cities or big school districts. And I have worked in two different school districts now, and I would say that it really depends on kind of who you're talking to about the importance of it. So a lot of families where I live are farmers, and a lot of kids do rodeo, and a lot of kids do like lots of like manual labor, because
Oh,
it's just part of the
interesting.
culture and like part of like their
Yeah.
upbringing. And so when you think of like an active person, like that's a majority of how like people are active where I'm from. Like they're
Oh,
moving cows,
okay.
they're riding horses, they're baling hay, like they're working on the farm, they're pulling watermelons, like they're doing all things like that. And then like actually where I live, it really just kind of depends like student to student what they see the
Hmm.
value in it. Personally, the school that I was at for the past 7 years, they really do put a big emphasis on physical education. And I was lucky to work with a school district where like they made sure that kids have like PE every single day. And like, especially when they get to high school, it's only required for 1 year in Oregon. And so like,
Oh.
um, it I would say that like the high school teacher and myself, I think, do a good job of encouraging kids to just like stay in PE classes because it's such a huge like life skill that people need to have in their lives. But it just looks so much different here because we don't have tons of like clubs or like weightlifting centers or anything. But it's just a little bit different than probably like downtown LA.
Yeah. No, but it's so cool. Like, and it's funny because even just hearing you like describe it, like it's different when we think of like activity. Like, I would say over here, it's more like planned activities, like kids are going to like a sport, a dance class, a
Mhm.
this. But as you were saying, you're like, it's more like life skills and manual labor over there. They're working on a farm, they're doing this. And for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool because yeah, we forget like that is movement. Like they're doing things in a different way, and maybe instead of, just playing video games, like they're outside and they're doing things or helping their families. And it is kind of cool. I think like a comparable over here in California, there like it would be like in Fresno. Like I know, I have had some friends that have taught in Fresno, and I'll see the same thing. They like have farm animals that they take care of, and they do like local things in the community like that. And there's a lot of like movement in that regard. But no, that's very interesting. We definitely don't have that here, like in the middle of Los Angeles.
Yeah, and like we do have sports and like planned activities and
Of
stuff.
course, yeah.
But like just I would
Yeah.
say like big body movement and stuff is really
Yes.
an integral part of like you have to be able to like move cows and like you have to be able
Yeah.
to load hay if you're going to live in the middle of nowhere, you know?
Yeah. So you were mentioning in Oregon in high school, they only need 1 year of PE. Here in California, it's 2 years, which I think it should be every year, but that's just me.
Same.
But in middle school, how are they getting it in your schools, grades 6th, 7th, and 8th? And how often do they see you guys? Are you on block schedule? What is it like in where you were?
So, the school that I was just at is a 4-day school. So we only go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And in the state of Oregon, we have like mandatory PE minutes, and then those minutes are modified for 4-day schools because Oregon actually does have a handful of 4-day schools or 4.5-day schools. So we see kids every single day, and we see them for 55 minutes. And in middle school, all 6th graders take general PE. And then when they get in 7th grade and 8th grade, they have the choice of a general PE class or a weightlifting class. And that kind of just depends on like,
Oh,
are the kids wanting to learn how to lift weights? Because when we get to high school, that's like their only option is weightlifting. And, or
okay.
like, are they more athletic and like they want to build some more muscle for their sport? Or do they want to like just play more games and work on some of their more like social skills and things like that? So we see them every day, 55 minutes.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I feel like I'm starting to notice a trend. I'm like, California, we got to step it up, California. Because I feel like when I talk to people from different states, they're like, people have weightlifting. Like that's a very common thing. Like that's a common
Yeah.
path that you can
hmm
take. And over here, I don't feel like it is. Like I know I do it at my school, but like I I don't know. I don't think like I said, I've just been talking to other teachers. I'm like, I feel like we got to step it over. I don't know if it's like just localized where I am that we need to step it up, or like what the broader California, I need to talk to other people in California, like maybe in Northern California, and see what they're doing. But I love that, you guys are doing that and starting that, like you were saying in 7th and 8th grade, they can start choosing and then kind of prepping them for like high school weightlifting. Now, you said your classes, and I know other schools are like this too. We have 90-minute blocks.
hmm
Granted, it's high school, but it's a 90-minute block. But our middle schoolers also have 90-minute blocks. And as a PE teacher, I love it because they have like 8 to 10 minutes to change in the beginning of the class. Then we have like over an hour, and then it's like another like 8 to 10 minutes to change at the end of class. How is it having only 50 minutes? Like, do they have time to change? Do they not? Like, how much teaching time do you have? Like, what does that look like? Because I know that some people have reached out to me and they're like, we only have 50 minutes. Like, what do we do?
Okay, that's a great question. So, I had 6th grade PE first period, and I would give them 5 minutes after the tardy bell rang, to be dressed down. And my school requires kids to dress down. Not every school does require that, even for middle school.
Yeah.
And kind of the beauty of having 6th graders first period is like, it's their first year of middle school. They still are trying to learn how to learn and be in middle school and kind of do all the things, and they just take longer to acclimate. So from the
Mhm.
time like the first bell would ring to after 5 minutes, that's 10 minutes, which is more than enough time. And by the
Yeah.
end of the year, they were fine. And then I would just give them 5 minutes to dress down at the end. So I would lose like 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end. But like I plan for that. And like right when the 5 minutes hit, I would start taking roll. And then we start our warm up or our warm up game. And like you just have to make sure your transitions are really, really fast. And like, where kids going, like, what teams they're going to be on. They know how to get into teams. They know how to do, setups for games. So just being super, super efficient with your time management and like your class flow and your transitions helps so that you don't lose so much of your actual like movement time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I imagine that would be like the trickiest thing. Like I said, luckily we've always had this 90-minute block. And even when I was a high school student, I went to a school that had 90-minute blocks. Um, and it's funny because my health class obviously is a little more academic, and 90 minutes feels very long
Yes.
because we don't have that like
Yes.
cushion for transition time. And I'm like, wow, this is a lot of learning and it's great. But I feel like with PE, it just like flows so much
Yeah.
better. Whereas sometimes with the other class, I'm like, this feels really long.
Yeah, there's definitely some benefits to having blocks and like benefits to having like the hour-long classes, but I can imagine that a 90-minute block period for health would be almost eternal.
Yeah. So, what was like your split this year of like how many PE classes you taught versus health?
Okay, so I taught a sixth grade PE class, a sixth grade health class, a ninth grade health class, an 11th grade health class, a seventh, eighth PE, and then I taught, because I also teach health science classes, I taught one class called Health and Human Performance, and then another one called Intro to Health Career Skills. So I taught all the classes and middle school leadership. So busy,
Yeah,
busy.
you are busy.
Yes. Yeah.
You are so busy.
Yep.
That's a lot of preps. That's a lot of preps.
It is an insane amount of preps. And,
Yeah.
I think I would
And
rather maybe do that than teach the same class all day long, or just like two classes all day long.
yeah.
I would get too bored. But it is,
Yes.
thankfully I don't have too many students, so like assessments go pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Like, what's your class size range?
So my smallest class size this year was, I think, 7 students, and my biggest was 50. So I had all of the sixth
Wow.
graders first period, and then it, like most classes, they'll get like kind of just like split down the middle, except for sixth grade. They stay together for
Yeah.
PE and they stay together for music, and then you get usually like 50-ish% of each class kind of like going through your schedule.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My biggest was like one year. It was like, I think it was my first year too. It was like 58. And I was like, ooh, this is a
That's a
lot.
lot, especially
And
for weightlifting.
yeah. And you know what's funny about that too? I always think about this and I was like, can you imagine if you had a gym membership and you took a class with 58 people in it?
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, that is just so big. And I always think it's funny that that they make PE classes so large
Mhm.
because it's such a safety issue in terms of bodies and moving and kids. And I'm just like, that's so funny. Like that they thought, let's just put them all in. Cause I think they think of it as like a lot of gameplay. So you need a lot of people, but I was like, there's a lot happening and a lot of equipment.
Yeah. If you have like if you're teaching a game-based class, like on a gym floor, like 30 to 36 is perfect. But if you're like in a weight
Yeah.
room, like no more than 30, I think.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's great. Like I think my weightlifting class that I had this year was like, I know it was under 40. So I think it was between maybe it was around like 35-ish and it was perfect. It was perfect. But I was like, yeah, 50 is not
Yeah,
happening.
if you have
I was
enough,
like, we're not.
if you have enough stations, then that would probably be fine.
Yes.
But like if
Yes,
you don't have enough
exactly.
stations and you have like 5 or 6 kids like around one rack, that's too many.
It's a lot.
Well,
It's a
congested.
lot. Yes. So as we all know, teachers should be making more money. We should be getting paid more. I will stand by this statement, and I totally agree with it. But we have many teachers out there like you and I using our skills to make money in other ways. And either it's to bring income in or just to have like a creative outlet. Tell us about like how and why you started your Teachers Pay Teachers, and how do you find, this is my biggest question, like how do you find the time to be consistent while you are teaching with all those preps and you're coming up with these creative projects that you're sharing? And you'll hear this in the intro, but I was just like, your project saved me. Like I was like my first year was teaching health this year. And I was like, what does Morgan have on her page? I was like, bye, 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 bye. And I was like, this is what we're doing this week. And I was so grateful. But yeah, like, how did you start this? How did you get into it? I know there's so many teachers that like, oh, I want to make money on the side or do this, but it's hard for them to be consistent.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very sweet of you. So I started selling stuff during the beginning of the pandemic. So I had just had my son, and then like 4 weeks later, the pandemic started. And then
Oh my gosh.
my principal was like, listen, if you want to come back to work, we're just going to do packets and it's going to be so easy. And so it's like, okay. And then it was not easy and it was not packets. And I needed a way to like get stuff to my kids like digitally, because we were doing the whole, pandemic Zoom, Google Meets, a whole new world.
Yeah.
So I needed like something that was going to kind of be a little bit more engaging for my students. And then two, I was like going stir crazy because I had a newborn baby and I couldn't leave my house. And so I so badly just needed to just do literally anything, like literally anything. So I was like, I'm just going to like watch all of these YouTube videos and figure out how to do this. So I started selling just like, I don't know, April, March, right after the pandemic started. And as far as like when it comes to like being consistent, this all goes back to just like being a dancer and like being raised a dancer is like you just have to have like so much like a discipline. Like motivation, we don't know her, we just know discipline. You know what I mean? Like we just know that Thursday nights we're going to be grading and then Friday we're going to do this, like, and I just create routines. And I stole this word from Casey Morris, the CEO teacher, is systematize.
Oh, yes.
Right? We have to systematize things. And I just was like, systematize this, systematize that, systematize this. You know what I mean? So it just comes down to like, this is what I want, so this is what I have to do. And in order to do it, like you just have to stay dedicated. So it's like I have a million, like I just keep adding to my checklist and then checking off the top and then adding and then checking and just keep going through it. And sometimes I think motivation will be there, and like sometimes I get more done than I would anticipate. But just even if it's just like 1, 2, 3 little things each week, you just gotta stay consistent.
Yeah, no, I mean, I admire your discipline and your focus because I know how exhausting our job is. And there are times where like when I come home, I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And then I sit on the couch and I'm like, I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing.
Yeah.
I'm watching a story on TV. I'm watching a reality or Housewives. Like, I'm like, this is where we are. And it is hard, but I do like something you said, like with the systems, like I like how you're like on Thursday, this is the day I do this. On Friday, this is the day I'm doing this. And just so there's like some type of like category for things. Cause like that probably, works really well with me. Like I know for me, like when I'm doing podcast season stuff, it's like, I know Thursday a podcast is out. So that means on this day, like I have to do this. So it's done by this day. So yeah, anybody listening, I think this is a great tip, and I'm going to start doing stuff like that too. Cause I always say like, I'm going to add more to my Teachers Pay Teacher store. And I have like all these things that I do, but I will say it is a little challenging sometimes to like, when the thing in your brain and you're like, wait a minute, now I have to put it on paper for somebody else to follow with steps and this and this. I'm like, that's when we get a little tricky because it's all up here.
Yeah. It's kind of like that, like perfectionism, like box, right? It kind of like keeps us in and like, we all make mistakes. Like I've put out stuff that I was like, oh, I did not spell that word right. That's really embarrassing. Right. But like, you just have to like take action and just like do something so that you can move yourself forward in, your podcast or your weightlifting or your business. Like you just have to take action and just move forward, even if it's not perfect, which is hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's the hardest part because I'm the person that will like dwell on things forever and make them seem so hard. And then I'll finally sit down and do them and I was like, "Oh, that was it." Like why was I stressing about this? Why didn't I just sit down and do
Hmm.
it? Oh my gosh. Wait, so you also mentioned that you also on the side teach some online classes. And I know some teachers have been curious about, obviously in schools, we have to be in person. And there have been teachers who like want a little more flexibility. Like, what has that been like? How does it compare? Is it more work? Like, what have you
So
experienced?
in addition to like my full-time job, I have an additional contract for a virtual learning academy. And I previously mentioned I teach in Eastern Oregon. It is kind of desolate, and I would say for like most school districts, they'll have like a central office, and for the central office is like where you're going to find like your psychologist, your speech pathologist, like your audiologist, your autism specialist. And we like don't have a central office. We have what's called an intermountain district, which means that all the schools contract through a service district. Um, and I work through that service district. So I believe it's
Okay.
like 28 different districts contract through them. And so I teach through like their online platform for students who like need credit recovery. So for kids who maybe are like not in a great situation and they are trying to graduate early, or they are in a good situation and they just want to graduate early. I'll teach kids who, like, in their district, they don't have a PE teacher or they don't have a health teacher. There's no one to actually teach them in person. And then I'm also teaching kids who are doing like a large portion of their diploma is finished, and then they're also taking like college courses online, and they're like, oh yeah, I
Oh,
didn't really
okay.
take my PE class, or I didn't really take my health class, and I kind of need that before I graduate. And
Yeah.
it is kind of a messy process, to be perfectly honest. And after 3 years, like, there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that I've learned, because it's not the same thing as like teaching the Zoom classes or the Google's Meets. I have no idea what these kids' faces look like. I've never met them
Wow.
in person. Like, they're literally just like a little profile, like in my little portal. Um, and it's
Uh-huh.
definitely a service that is needed, but it's also sometimes not taken seriously either by the parents or the student, because it's kind of just a means to an ends for most students. It's really what it is.
They're just like trying to
Yeah,
get the credits, they're trying to get the grade, the
yeah,
recovery. Wow, that's
yeah.
interesting. So I imagine then like that would be good for somebody who wants something extra, wants to be remote, and doesn't necessarily need that interaction. But if it's somebody who gets the joy from like, I want to be there, like this is probably not
Yeah,
for them.
so because I don't do any like live classes or like live streams or anything like that, it's very like student paced. I just
Okay.
um like, I don't really interact with students like at all, unless like they're failing, or they're missing something, or they haven't logged in a really long time. That's really the only time I have like a lot of interaction with students, and it's usually just over like email or like our messaging system. And it's the way that it's set up through our service district is it's similar to like a coaching contract. So it's not like full-time teacher pay. It's not even part-time teacher pay. It's like if you were a basketball coach or something like that. So it's like stipend
Okay.
pay.
Like a
Hmm.
stipend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Which means like you may be putting in more hours than like you're getting in, because that's what I've heard that sometimes online work can be a lot because you're like setting up so much. But I imagine like once you know it and have it your system set up,
Yeah.
then it's like
Yeah.
runs a little
This,
smoother. But
the third year in has
interesting.
definitely been, I would say, more of a breeze, because I've kind of figured it out. Um, so
Yeah.
it's just like a lot of front loading is kind of what it is, but then it pays off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, good thing you are disciplined, focused, and organized. You are so organized. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so organized. I love it. So how do you then prioritize your physical and mental health? You're a busy teacher, you're a mom, you have lots of side things going on. How do you do this for yourself?
That's a great question. So since like having a kid and like just adding more to my plate, there's definitely some things that I've had to let go of as far as like my priorities. And my number one priority is sleep. And so like I will I will give up whatever, like I will give up TV, I will give up like extra work, I will give up laundry, whatever. It's like I have to have a certain amount of sleep and a certain quality of sleep, and that has to be my number one priority. And then after that, eating, and then I just by nature I'll get, my 10,000 steps a day, right? Because we're teachers, we're PE teachers, we're on our feet all day. Then I work out on the weekends. And being summer, I get a workout every single day. But someone might say like, well, you could just get up early. Well, I get up at 4:30 every day. So I'm not getting up any earlier to work out.
Early. That's early.
So like I just all of my working out, all of my plans, all of that stuff, we just save it for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I just do all of that over the weekend.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned sleep. It's funny. I literally just posted about this the other day, and that's my number one too. I was like, I have to. And I'm a different person. Like I can't show up as my best self, like when I'm not at least having 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Like my body physically feels a difference when I get 8 hours, even versus like 7 versus 8 hours. Yes. My body knows.
And in the summer, like I'm still like trying to go to bed at like a decent time, and I'm letting myself sleep in until like 6:30 or like 7, and I could not be any happier. You know what I mean? Like my body's like, thank you so much. Yeah. Like this is how it should be all of the time.
Yeah.
So, yep, sleep has to be number one.
Yeah, it's funny too, because I just got on summer break, and I was telling my husband, because we're going to wake up and go to Disneyland tomorrow, but I've been waking up all week at like clockwork at 4:30 in the morning. And I usually don't. It's definitely something hormonal. But yeah, so waking up at like 4:30 in the morning is killing me, because I usually wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and it's only an hour earlier, but it feels so different. So today I told him, I was like, I'm going to go to bed an hour earlier, because if I'm going to wake up at 4:30, I need to be ready for Disneyland. So I'm going to go to bed an hour earlier, because if this is the time my body wants to like wake up, I have to compensate.
Yes. I totally get that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. So one question I ask all my guests is, what advice would you share with your teenage self and teens today?
So one piece of advice that I would like to share with teenage Morgan is just to like step into being yourself a lot sooner. And like, I know that I was like, I would almost say like paranoid, and like constantly thinking about like how I was perceived, and like nobody really cares. You know what I mean? Like nobody really cares what color you're wearing, or how you wear your hair, or like what words you said. Like nobody's really invested that much, and you're just like pulling a lot of joy from your life by just not being the true version of who you are. And I would pass that on to teenagers too. Just like whatever version of you are, like don't be afraid to be that person. Just own up to who you are, step into that version of you, because like that's who we want to be around. We don't want to be down a watered down version of you. We don't want to be like you inside of your box. Like we want like the true genuine you to like shine through, and like that's who we want to get to know and like form relationships with. So that's what I would like to share.
That's such a good piece of advice, because I think about sometimes like people I admire, and it tends to be people who are like unapologetically themselves. Like they're just themselves, whether it's quirky, like whatever it is, like when you see somebody just like show up and like they own who they are, you're like,
It
that's
is
so
so
cool.
cool.
Like it almost gives people like permission to do it too. And like, wait, I want to
Yeah,
do it too.
yeah. And it's, I think like as people get older, they like kind of shed more of that, like, oh, nobody really cares. Oh, like this is really me. Like you just kind of
Yeah.
shed all of those layers. And it's just like, if you think about like how much more powerful and genuine you could be if you start that when you're 12, or when you're 13. Like
Yeah.
just imagine how much further you could go in life and how much more joy you can get from your life by just being you instead of having to like be a smaller version of you or a toned down version of you.
Yes.
Thank
Solid
you.
advice, Morgan. Solid advice. I love this gem. So how can we support you and where can we
Oh,
direct
thank you.
people?
So I just started a TikTok called Mrs. HPE.
It's so cute.
Yeah, so you
Everyone
can follow me on TikTok. I have an Instagram, which is Mrs. Hernandez _ health and PE. And then I sell a lot of digital and print resources on Teacher Pay Teachers, Amped Up Learning, Classful, Made by Teachers, wherever you get your digital resource stuff. But most people are familiar with Teacher Pay Teachers, and it's just called Morgan Hernandez, Health and PE. No fancy name. That's exactly what it is. Health and PE resources for super busy teachers. So if you're super busy like me and you need a project, you need a bulletin board, you need bell ringers, you need stuff to fill in the gap and kind of like build some structure into your class, visit my store because I got you. I got you covered. I got whatever you
Yes.
need. I got it for you.
Yes, and I will totally give Morgan a 10 out of 10 review because kind of like you were saying, like I would be good at creating like my lectures for my classes and I'd have all these slides, like the lecture stuff I had down, but because we had this new textbook, but when it came to like projects, like nothing was there. And I was like, I did the teaching part, like now what do they do? And I was like, thank goodness for Morgan's store because I was like, this is my first year teaching this and I do not have time I was so busy with the content. I was like, I don't have time to make projects right now. So it was a lifesaver. And for anybody that saw any of my classroom videos this year, Morgan is the one that created that super cute like banner that was like in my healthy era with all the little posters. Like that was Morgan's work. And as soon as you like showed it on your Instagram, I was like, I have to purchase this. And it was up all year and I adored it. And when we packed up our classroom at the end of the year, I packed it with me and I got it laminated.
Oh, thank you.
So
yeah,
cute.
I just packed up my classroom for the summer and I did the same thing. I was like very carefully putting down all of the pieces because it has to go back up. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, teachers are so amazing and creative, and I'm so glad that you are putting your creativity and talents out there so that we can reap the benefits as well. So thanks to everyone for listening to the Pretty Little Lifters podcast. I'm so grateful for our guest, Morgan Hernandez, for joining us on this episode. It makes me so happy to know another awesome health and PE educator who is creative and prioritizing a modern health and PE education. And thank you so much, Morgan. And I will share Morgan's info in the show notes so you can support them. And I will talk to you next episode. Bye.